Kuta Sicha is Chelek Yudalid Sicha of Rosh Hashana, in Chassidus Sicha, explaining the ideas of Rosh Hashana, especially Rosh Hashana Shechal Liyus B'Shabbos, which is the Kviyas of this year, the year that the Sicha was said, and the year that we are learning the Sicha together. This year, Tafshin Pei Aleph, when Rosh Hashana will be, the first day Rosh Hashana is on Shabbos, and in this Sicha, we'll underscore and emphasize the uftu, the greatness of Yom Tov Sheni, of the fact that we blow shofar only on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Yom Tov Sheni shel Rosh Hashanah chaluk b'Yom Tov Sheni shel Shara Yom Tovim b'shaychusei liyom Tov Harishon ule'etzem teichonei v'inyanei shel hachag. The second day of Rosh Hashanah and its relationship with the first day of Rosh Hashanah is different than the second day of other Yom Tovim and their relation to the first day of their Yom Tov. In other words, Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, each in Chutz La'aretz have a Yom Tov Sheni, and it's a hemshech of Yom Tov Rishon, but the relationship between the Yom Tov Sheni and Yom Tov Rishon is different than Yom Tov Sheni shel Rosh Hashanah and Yom Tov Rishon shel Rosh Hashanah. U'kamuvan me'halacha l'maisa sheba mishtavin kol Yisrael, and one of the ways we see this is in halacha, which in halacha all Yidden are equal, meaning to say, even though in the various different levels of pshat and remesh, drush and sod of understanding Torah, there's different levels in understanding, and therefore different levels between people. In halacha, everyone is equal, everyone is obligated in the same halacha. So the halacha is Shahanoilid v'hanechlav b'yem alav d'Rosh Hashanah, asur gam b'yem beis d'Rosh Hashanah. That something which is born or laid or milked on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is asur to be used also on the second day. Meaning to say, generally speaking, something that is born on Yom Tov is asur on Yom Tov. So if something is an egg is laid on Yom Tov morning, the first day of Yom Tov in the morning, that afternoon you can't use it because it's neiled be Yom Tov. But once you wait till the second day of Yom Tov, then you could use it because it's a Maman of Shach. If the first day, the whole reason why we're observing the second day of Yom Tov is Mitzat Seiked Yomer, because we don't know which day is really the first day of Yom Tov. So if the first day of Yom Tov is the real day of Yom Tov, then by the second day it's already Chel HaMoed, or it's not Yom Tov anymore. If the second day is Yom Tov, then the first day was out of Yom Tov. And if the first day was out of Yom Tov, then there's nothing wrong with enjoying that which was laid or milked or born on out of Yom Tov. So in a regular Yom Tov, something which is born neilad or nechlav on Yom Aleph to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Aleph the Yom Tov, could be used on Yom Beis the Yom Tov. But on Rosh Hashanah, that's not the halacha. V'hatam bo zehu, and the reason is lefi shebeis Yom de Rosh Hashanah heim kiyom echad aruch, because al pi halacha, the 2 days of Yom Tov are considered one long day, and therefore anything that was born on Yom Aleph to Rosh Hashanah, or Neilad or Nechlav on Yom Aleph to Rosh Hashanah, is still Asr on Yom Beis to Rosh Hashanah. Especially according to Chassidus, the East of Lukut Torah, where we learn in Lukut Torah, ala pasuk Yechayenu miyomayim, on the pasuk that Yechayenu miyomayim, that He will bring us life from the 2 days. So Lukut Torah explains the Yemayim Heim Beis Yom Rosh Hashanah, that Yemayim refers to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Ki Rosh Hashanah le'elam Beis Yamim, Rosh Hashanah is always 2 days. Afilu bizman shoyim mekatchen al pi ha're'iyah. Even though in that time, the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when the new month was renewed, was mekudesh according to the sighting of the moon, and then you made Rosh Chodesh, you made a new month based on 2 Eidim that saw a new Levana. Rosh Hashanah, which means the new Tishrei, was still 2 days. The Rosh Chodesh or the Rosh Hashanah of Tishrei was still 2 days. And that's Pshat Yechayenu miyomayim, that Yachayis comes from Yemayim, from the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, which Rosh Hashanah is always 2 days. It's explained in Lukut Torah. On both days of Rosh Hashanah, there is Aliyah Sa'ilamis. Aliyah Sa'ilamis means that the worlds go back up to their source. In other words, during the year, Elam, the world recognizes, identifies itself as an independent entity from the Ruchnius, even though its source is a Lakus, but it doesn't recognize it, or it presents itself as an independent entity. And Rosh Hashanah, there's Aliyas Elamis. The Elamis go back up to nullify themselves and recognize that their Metzias is a Metzias of a Lakus. And then when we blow shofar, we bring down Kabbalas HaMalchus, and we bring down the worlds back here, that they should once again see themselves as the independent entity with the Malchus, with the kingship of the Eibshter. So this Aliyas Elamis is not just the first day of Rosh Hashanah until we blow shofar the first time, but the Gourarie explains that Aliyas Elamis takes place on both days of Rosh Hashanah. On the first day of Yom Tiv, the Aliyas Rosh Hashanah, the Aliyas Elamis is B'chinas Pnimius, which means that the worlds are entirely bottled, they're entirely removed from their identity and totally nichlil, totally elevated into Elokus from above. And the second day is B'chinas Chitzenius, which basically means that the worlds begin to see themselves as an entity, just they recognize that their entity is really an entity of Elokus. In other words, they begin to come back down, back to the world. It's not as removed from the world as it is B'Yom Aleph. How they move them is that, but it's understood from this, from the fact that whether it's Pnimius or Chitzenius, both days is Aliyas Elamis. It's understood that Shabbos Yom and Rosh Hashanah Minyan Echad. Aliyas Elamis, that both days of Rosh Hashanah, both are the same idea. Aliyas Elamis, the elevation of the worlds into Elokus above. It's just that there's two different details, Pnimius and Chitzenius. On day one, it's entirely removed from its identity, and on day one, it begins to recognize an identity, but still recognizing the Elokus that is sustaining it. Therefore, it's called B'chinas Chitzenius, because it's not as strong of a bittul, but it's still Aliyas Elamis. And therefore, it's still the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are both the same idea, which is consistent with the halachic idea of Yom Echad Aruch. So now we understand that Yom Tov Sheni Shel Rosh Hashanah is much deeper connected to Yom Tov Rishon Shel Rosh Hashanah than Yom Tov Sheni of other Yom Tovim, to their first day. Now this connection that we have between the second day of Rosh Hashanah and the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and to the whole idea, the whole concept of Rosh Hashanah, which is Aliyas Elamis and Kabbalas HaMalchus, as we'll see, is Nikeres u'mizbatas v'yeser se'ez, is even more recognized and even more expressed B'kviyas Teshana Zu, in the kviyas of this year, Kishayam Tov Rosh Hashanah Chaliyas B'Shabbos, when the first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, Kidul L'Kaman as follows. So this idea that the 2 days are connected because they both engender the same concept of Aliyas Ha'elamis, this is seen even more in the kviyas of this year when Rosh Hashanah begins on Shabbos. And in order to explain this, we have to first explain what is truly the idea of Rosh Hashanah. In Rosh Hashanah we say, this is the day, the beginning of your work, of your handiwork. But the fact that it says Ma'asecha Lashon Rabim, your Maisim, move on, it's understood that this day, the day of Rosh Hashanah, is not only the beginning of the creation of mankind, which we know that Adam Arishon was created in Rosh Hashanah, which Rosh Hashanah was the 6th day of Sheshis and Ebreshis. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning, is the words we'll use in a moment, the renewal of even those things that were created in the first 5 days of Brias Ha'olam, before Adam Rishon was created, are also renewed, are also Tchilas Ma'asecha on Rosh Hashanah. And as is explained at length in the many ma'amorim in Chassidus of Rosh Hashana. Hainu. And he explains, the renewal of creation on Rosh Hashana is not something unique to Adam, to mankind. Meaning to say, what happens on Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah, the world is renewed. Whatever, all the Chayis Olam is, and everything that comes down from Elokus into the world is nischadish, is renewed on Rosh Hashanah. But this is not something that's unique to the Adam, to the person, to the Medaber. The Ischachus happens for the entire world. Everything that's in this world and everything that's in the previous worlds, the higher worlds, everything that's in the entire Seder Ishtalshalus is renewed every year. V'im kol zeh, and nevertheless, although other things are being renewed, even things that are not directly part of the Adam, when are they renewed? They are renewed on the day that Adam Rishon, on the day that mankind is being renewed. In other words, you would think that the things that were created on Yom Aleph, things that were created on Yom Beis, will be renewed on the same day that they were created the first time around. So he says, no, the ischachos of the entire Bria, the Bria of this world and the Bria of the worlds before this one, are all nischadash on Rosh Hashanah, all renewed on Rosh Hashanah, the day that Adam, that mankind is renewed. And the reason for this is, what is the reason that the ischachos of the entire Bria happens on Rosh Hashanah? Is because tachlis kol ha'ishtalshalus v'ha'ilamis v'hatzimtzumim v'ha'misochim v'ha'parsois, the purpose of everything that it took place in the build-up to this world, Seder ha'ishtalshalus, the spiritual worlds, the tzimtzumim, the contractions, the misachim, the covers, or the curtains, the parsois, and all different terminologies in Chassidus for the various different stages that Elokus, that the godly light goes through in order to reach this world and to create this world and to sustain this world. All of this whole process is all for one reason. It is all for one purpose, for one tachlis. Because the Eibishter has a taiva, a desire, that there should be a dira b'tachtenim, a dwelling place for Elokus, a dwelling place for Hashem, for the atzmus of Hashem, for the essence of Hashem in this lowest of all worlds. Ubeizin yonim bazeh, and there's two details in this. When we say that the Eibishter has a taiva, there's two aspects to this. Aleph, one aspect, something which we can't know and comprehend. Why? The reason, why does the Eibishter want the Dira B'Tachtenim? That we can't know. There's no reason for it. It's beyond any reason. It's only because this is what the Eibishter desired. As explained in the famous Hemshech of Rosh Hashanah Tov Reis Samachvav, Maimer Admor Azaken, the expression of the Alter Rebbe, if a taiva is kinkasha. You can't ask a question on a desire. Someone wants something, desires something, there's a deep internal yearning, desire for something, doesn't always have an explanation. Doesn't always make sense. You can't explain it. This kavanah, the purpose of Dira B'Tachtenim, is beyond any reason. So when we say Nisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu Liyas Le'Yizbarach Dira B'Tachtenim, what we're saying is that there's two aspects. Aspect number one is something that we don't know. We can't comprehend the reason for it. Why does the Eibishter have this taiva? We don't know. This taiva is l'mayla mitam, is beyond reason. Beis, the second aspect is something that what we do know is what is the taiva, what is the desire, what does he want. The purpose and intent of the creation of the world. The Eibishter wanted a dwelling place in this lowest world. The Eibishter wanted that Atzmos Umhus, the essence of Hashem, the highest level of Elokus, of Eibishter, should be able to dwell, to live, to be in this lowest of all worlds. So why he want this, we don't know. But what he wants, we do know that there should be a Dira B'Tachtein. But based on this, if you're telling me that the whole purpose of creation is in order for the Eibishter to have a Dira B'Tachteinim, Adayin Eino Muzberes, Tachlis Isavusam Shal Kol Elam Misal Yenim. What is the purpose of all the previous, the higher worlds? Why were they created? The Eibishter could have just created the lowest of all creations, namely this world, Bilvad, and they will be a dwelling place for Hashem. Why do we need all the Elam Yisraelim? If the Eibishter wants a Dira B'Tachtenim, let him create Tachtenim, let him create the lowest world, skip all the previous worlds, and the Eibishter is omnipotent. The Eibishter can do anything. So why does he need all the other worlds? He wants a Dira B'Tachtenim, let him create a Tachtenim, and then have a Dira in it. What's the explanation? Why does the Eibishter create all of the Elam Yisraelim, the higher worlds, the previous spiritual worlds, before creating this lowest of all worlds? If all he wants is a Dira B'Tachtenim, because the will and intent of Hashem is not only that his dwelling should be in this lowest of all worlds. What Hashem wanted was that the lowest creations, meaning the creations of this lowest world, they are the ones that should create and make the Dira for the Eibishter, the dwelling for Hashem. It should happen through their work and through their toil. I should really say our work and our toil, because we are those Nivroim HaTachtenim. Rak al yedei his havusam be'efin shekadam lehem kol seder ha'ishtalshelus shala elamis, and this is only possible if before the creation of this world it is preceded by the entire seder ha'ishtalshelus and all of the previous worlds, v'hadra gosam milamayla lamata, and the gradual descent from above to below, kimavur bidach, as explained in the Chassidus. It's actually a more lengthy discussion in Chassidus, and to give a very brief glimpse into what he's saying here, he's saying like this: if we didn't need Avedas Hamata, if we didn't need the person's involvement, the human's involvement in this Dira B'Tachtenim, then you would be right. The Eibishter could create a world, build himself a house in this world, and live in it. But since the whole purpose of Dira B'Tachtenim is that the Eibishter wanted the Adam HaTachtein, the human being in this world, to create a Dira B'Tachtenim, then what he has to do is he has to elevate this world and make it more spiritual, more holy, better, in order for it to be a Dira B'Tachtenim. Now, if there was no gradual process to create this world, there was just a jump from Atzmos, or from L'mayla Meishtalshelus till Elam Hazeh HaTachtein, then what would the person be elevating to? The person doesn't have the power to elevate from the lowest world, skip all of the higher worlds, and go straight to the highest of the highest level. Because the Avedas Hamata, the person, because he's a limited person, can only go step by step. So in order for the Mata, for the Adam HaTachtein to be able to change this world, we need this gradual process in order to go back up. So in order for us to go back up in a gradual process, we had to be created in a gradual process. So, in other words, if the Eibishter can go from 100 to 1 in one step, we can't do that. We have to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And therefore the Eibishter created the world with 100 steps, so that when we have to go back up, we can go from 1 to 2 to 3, etc. So what we see from over here is that the fact that the Eibishter created all the Elim Yisraelim is because his kavanah in Dira B'Tachtonim is that the Mata, the Adam HaTacht, and the person in this world should be the one to make this Dira B'Tachtonim. And that's what it means, Tachlis Kol Ishtalshlos, where we said the second paragraph of this column, Tachlis Kol Ishtalshlos Vayilomis Vatzimtzumim V'chulu B'chteish Sav Elam V'Zatachtim. That everything that happened before is because of this world, because yes, that the Eibishter was Nasaba Dira B'Tachtenim, and Dira B'Tachtenim can only happen by the Tachten, and the Tachten needs all of these Elim Yisraelim in order to elevate the Mata. Therefore, the Eibishter created everything. So everything that the Eibishter created is all part of the process of Dira B'Tachtenim. And now we can understand what it means that Rosh Hashana is Tchilas Ma'asecha. That not only the person, the creation of the human being is renewed on Rosh Hashana. Everything that was created in the 6 days of creation is all renewed on Rosh Hashanah. The whole purpose of everything that was created in the 6 days of creation is so that the mankind should be able to create a Dira B'Tachtenim with them. So they are renewed and the person is renewed. Because the person is the main element and purpose of why they were created. Until we renew the person, there's no reason to renew anything else. Because the whole reason for existence is only the person. So once the person is renewed, everything gets renewed with it. Even though the first time around, when Hashem created the world the first time, also everything was being created for the person. They weren't created at the same moment that Adam was created, but they were created beforehand. In other words, if we're only renewing something when the Adam is renewed, because everything was created for the Adam, then why the first time around was everything created before the Adam? At that time, the first time around, they were created as a preparation and to create an ability for their ultimate purpose, which is the Adam. The purpose of their creation was that later, when the person was created and Adam was created, he should find everything ready and prepared for his Aveda. So Hashem wanted that when Adam arrives to this world, everything should be ready to go. That he could start right away, he could start his Aveda of Dira B'Tachtenim. But later on, in the following years, when we are not creating it for the first time, but we are renewing it each year after year, especially after Matan Torah, which at this point the person is already involved in the Avodah, especially after Matan Torah, when by Matan Torah there became more possible to fuse together Maila and Mata, as we know that the Gzeira of Elyonim Layedu Lamata and Tachtenim Lamayla, that the above can't come down and the below can't go up, that decree was severed, was nullified, and now there is a greater fusion between the above and below. So now that the person is already involved in the Aveda, and therefore everything that was created is now seeing it's the fulfillment of its purpose through the person's Aveda. And therefore their renewal is now dependent on their main their main purpose, which is the Adam. Before the world was created, they were there as a preparation, and therefore they had to be there first. After the world was created, and after the Adam began his Aveda, now they're not there as a preparation, they're there as part of the Adam, because the Adam is the one who fulfills and brings them to their purpose, and therefore they can only be renewed together with the Adam. So what have we learned up until here? What we have learned up until here is that Rosh Hashanah is the renewal of the entire creation, of every aspect of creation, because the whole purpose of creation is Dira B'Tachtainim, is that this world should be a dwelling place for Hashem, and it's done by the person. The person, the Adam Lamata, is the one who creates the Dira B'Tachtainim, and he utilizes every aspect of creation, everything that was created in this world, and all the Olam Yisraelim, the higher worlds, are all being utilized in the process of Dira B'Tachtainim. Hinei. Now, let's carry this over to the Avodah of Rosh Hashana and to the mitzvah of Shofar. Since Rosh Hashana is the renewal of all the worlds, and in a way that their purpose is emphasized, which is which is to make a Dira B'Tachtainim, we must say that also in the main and primary mitzvah of Rosh Hashana, which is the mitzvah of the day, is the person's Aveda of the day. And that is what actually causes the renewal of the worlds, which is the mitzvah of Shofar. We have to see in that as well the expression of this Nisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this type of the Eibishter for Dira B'Tachtainim. In other words, if the whole lineage of Rosh Hashana is the Ischachos of the Bria in order for Dira B'Tachtainim, then in the mitzvah of the day, which is Shofar, there must be we must see this concept. They have to be related. Because Rosh Hashana is all about Dira B'Tachtainim, and what is the main mitzvah and Aveda of Rosh Hashana? Shofar. So we're going to explain now the connection between the mitzvah of Shofar and the concept and the Aveda of Dira B'Tachtainim. Amru Chazal tell us, mitzvah sayim b'Shofar. So the Gemara says, the mitzvah of the day of Rosh Hashana is Shofar. The Rambam says, Hilchos Tshuva, Af al pi shetkiya shofar b'Rosh Hashana gzeiras hakasuv. Even though the mitzvah of shofar is gzeiras hakasuv, we do it because Hashem said so in the Torah to blow shofar on Rosh Hashana. Remez yeshbei. Nevertheless, there's a remez, there's a hint in the mitzvah of shofar. Kaleimer uru yoshenim mishinaschem. Wake up, sleeping people, from your sleep. V'akitzun nedamim mitardemaschem. And those who are dreaming, wake up from your dream. Shapru ma'aseichem, improve your deeds, etc., etc. The shofar is a wake-up call to wake us up from our slumber and inspire us, awaken us to improve our actions. The fact that he's talking about this in Hilchos Tshuva, not in Hilchos Shofar or Hilchos Rosh Hashana, is because he wants to focus on the remez of tshuva in Shofar. Why is it relevant in Hilchos Tshuva to tell us that the mitzvah of Shofar is Gzeres HaKasuf? In other words, even if you're going to tell me that Shofar has a reason, similar to what the Rasag, the Psadi Goin writes, brought down in the Avud Raham, the symbolism, in the reasoning for Shofar. One of the things he says, we'll bring it later in the Sicha, is that it reminds us of Matan Torah, the Shofar of Matan Torah. It could also have another remes, or not another, it could also have a remes. Like we find in many mitzvahs, where there's a reason why the Eibishter gave it, and nevertheless there's a remes in it. So why does the Rambam have to sort of excuse himself and say, even though there's a kasuf, it's still a remes? Why couldn't he just focus straight onto the remes? Why is it necessary for the Rambam to emphasize here the Gzeres HaKasuf if he's heading in the direction of the remes? It's not like you need the Gzeres HaKasuf in order to understand the remes. Therefore you must say, that even this part, that it's Gzeres HaKasuf, is part of the Chiddush of the Rambam. That Tkiyah Shofar has two aspects. Gzeres HaKasuf, that it's Gzeres HaKasuf, the Remez Sheboi, and also has a Remez, Avedas HaShuvah, which is the Avedah of Shuvah. Both are elements within the mitzvah of Shofar. Now we'll explain what this means. First we'll explain the Gzeres HaKasuf, and then we'll explain the remes. Isav medesh al pasuk amarti achakma v'yirecheka mimeni. Shlomo Melech says, amarti achakma, I said I will use my chachma, I will be wise, v'yirecheka mimeni, but it's still far from me. The Shlomo lehizik b'chachmasei atam the mitzvahs parah aduma. Shlomo, with all of his chachma, with all of his wisdom, was not able to grasp the reason of parah aduma. Only Moshe Rabbeinu was told that to you, Moshe, I'm going to reveal the reason of the parah aduma, of the mitzvah of the parah aduma. Even though primarily we call parah aduma a chukah, a reason, a statute, a reason that's a mitzvah, that's a concept that's beyond reasoning. It doesn't mean that it is entirely removed from reasoning. That Lameshin is Galatam, because Moshe did know the reason. And Shlomo could not grasp the reason, which means really there is a reason. It's just such a deep, lofty reason that even Shlomo Melech could not grasp it. V'zui kavanas Rambam b'adgashosei. And that's what the Rambam is trying to tell us when he says that shofar is exeris hakasuf. That we're not trying to say that shofar has a reason. And the reason why it's not being explained to us is because it can't be revealed for some reason. It is by definition a gzeiras hakasuf, it is beyond reason. It has a reason, just it wasn't revealed to us. Shofar is higher than reason, there's no reason. This is what the Rambam is telling us. That shofar is something that's l'maylo me'atam, it's beyond reason, it's gzeiras hakasuf. There's no reason for it. Even Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have known the reason, because it doesn't exist. Why is there no reason? Because Tkiya Shofar is such a lofty, high level, that is beyond any connection to reasoning and to understanding. Comes out according to this that the mitzvah of Tkiya Shofar, which is a gzeiras hakasuf, it is beyond reasoning. Is so similar to this idea of the Eibishter wanting a dir b'tachtenim, which also, as we explained right before, in Ois, Beis is higher than reason. We can't explain the Eibishter's taiva. There's no reason for it. So now we begin to understand the correlation between shofar and dira b'tachtenim, that they are both things that originate in a place that are l'mayla me'atam, that are beyond reasoning. Not that they have a reason, we just don't know the reason, but the reason doesn't exist, they are beyond reasoning. But just like we said that dira b'tachtenim has two aspects. One aspect is what we don't know, which is the reason why. But the other aspect is what has to be done. Also, shofar has a practical aspect that we do know. That shofar represents the Avedas Adam, which is dividable into two elements. Wake up, you sleeping people, is the idea of Shurmira. Sleeping means that they've lost connection with the world of what they should be doing, of being awake in the world of avoida. So it's a concept of ra. And if you have to wake up from it, Shurmira, v'shaper ma'asechem, improve your deeds when you're not say teif. So shofar has an aspect that's l'mayla me'atam, gzeiras hakasuf. It also has a remez yeshbei avedas adam, just like the b'tachtenim, which the reason of it is l'mayla me'atam, but the application of it, the aveda, is we're told what to do. Therefore, the Rambam includes both together. The fact that it's gzeiras hakasuf and also the Rambam includes both of these aspects in Hilchos Tshuva to tell us that Av she'etzem inyan shel tkiyah shefer u'lamayla meitam u'ba b'bchinas shel lamayla meitam giluyim, even though that the etzem shefer is above reasoning and it comes from a level that's beyond reason, beyond giluyim. Giluyim is revelation. Something that has a reason would already be in the category of giluyim, because it's something that when the reason is revealed to us, we can relate to it on our level. Shefer comes from above giluyim. It comes from atzmos, from etzem, and therefore it is beyond reason. Because but how do we get there? Through the Vedas Adam. So this is totally consistent with the idea of Nisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu Dira B'Tachtenim, the concept, the definition of the concept of the Eibishter's Taiva is beyond reason. But the reason, the dira, the dwelling to which the Eibishter desired, Bav and Imsheches, it comes down, it's drawn down through the Aveda Sa'adam, through the person's Aveda. Now we understand that the mitzvah, the main mitzvah, the primary mitzvah of the day of Rosh Hashanah is Shefer, because it's the inyan of Shefer, the concept and theme of Shefer is mechuvan umasim, the kavanasa v'tachlisa shapriyas kol ha'elameis is consistent with the purpose and goal of the creation of all of the worlds, shenisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which the Eibishter had a taiva for a dira b'tachtenim, in these worlds, hamischadesas b'Rosh Hashanah, which is being renewed in Rosh Hashanah. So since all of the worlds are being renewed on Rosh Hashanah, and the purpose of the renewal is because the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachtenim, and this dira b'tachtenim is done through Aveda Sa'adam, through the Aveda of the person. This is exactly the same idea of Shefer, that it originates from a place of Taiva, of Gzeres HaKosov, and it's accomplished through Aveda Sa'adam. So now in Eis Gimel, we now understand the connection between dira b'tachtenim, which is Rosh Hashanah, and Shefer on Rosh Hashanah. That they both originate from a very, very high level, a level that's beyond tam, beyond reason, but are both implemented through Aveda Sa'adam, through the Aveda of the person. Now let's apply this to the Kviyas of Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah Shechal Liyis B'Shabbos. Hine kasher Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah Chal Liyis B'Shabbos. Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, K'Kviyas Shana Zu, like the Kviyas of this year. Chaser b'Yom Rosh Hashanah Inyan Zeh Shebetkiyas Shefer. It is lacking this element within Tkiyas Shefer, she'hischachus ba de'Aveda Sa'adam, that the hischachus, that the renewal of the worlds is being accomplished through the person. Ta'av she'Shabbos atzma payeles u'mamsheches as kol ha'amshachos v'hischachus shadei Tkiyas Shefer. Even though Shabbos itself is accomplishing all of the renewals that are meant to be accomplished by Shefer. And therefore we don't blow Shefer on Rosh Hashanah, as explained in various places in Chassidus. Chassidus brings up the question that's asked by many Mefarshim also, that Shefer is a mitzvah d'oraisa. And the reason why the Gemara says not to blow Shefer on Rosh Hashanah is because you might carry the Shefer to the Chacham to teach you how to blow the Shefer. So the question is, that's just a Gzeira. It's a Gzeira d'Rabbanan. Maybe someone is going to end up carrying a Shefer to go learn how to blow. But Shefer is d'oraisa. So why are we being mevatel a mitzvah esed d'oraisa, such a Shefer and such an important mitzvah, because of Gzeira d'Rabbanan? And of course, in Nigla there's many reasonings, there's many explanations given to it. Chassidus explains that the same thing that Shefer accomplishes on Rosh Hashanah, which is to bring down the renewal of the worlds on Rosh Hashanah, is done through Shabbos. Shabbos does the same thing, because Shabbos also, on a smaller level, Shabbos also has a liyas elmis, where the gashmius of the world gets elevated into its ruchnius. Happens every Shabbos. That's why Shabbos has no birurim. Shabbos is higher than birurim, because Shabbos there's no velt, there's no gashmius, there's no elamaz. Because there's aliyas elimis. So on Rosh Hashanah Shechal Liyis B'Shabbos, the hischachus ha'elimis that comes from the aliyas elimis is happening by itself. We don't need the shefer, so to speak. So even though Shabbos is accomplishing everything that would be accomplished by Shofar, so we don't have to worry about the renewal of the worlds. It's happening. But what is missing on Rosh Hashanah is this primary aspect, that the Ischachus should be triggered and accomplished through the Adam, through the person in this world. Because the renewal of the world on Yom Tov Shabbos is coming through the Kayach of Shabbos, which is holy on its own, without Shofar. So it's the holiness of Shabbos, the pre-existing holiness of Shabbos, that accomplishes the renewal of the worlds, and therefore you don't need Shofar. But because of that, you're lacking Avodas Adam. It's happening by itself. It's automatic. The person plays no role here. And therefore, so when do we experience this idea that the renewal of the worlds is being caused by the person, which is really the whole inyan of Rosh Hashanah? This is emphasized on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Which even when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos on the first day, we blow shofar on the second day. And on the second day, we have the Aveda of the person which draws down all of the Inyan of Rosh Hashanah. So, the advantage of Yom Beis de Rosh Hashanah, the greatness of Yom Beis de Rosh Hashanah is experienced mostly in a year when Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, because a Yom Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, and there's no Shofar on day one. Hayes says no Shofar on day one, while we are not lacking the Hischachos, because that happens, we are lacking Avodas Adam, that the person's Avodah should accomplish the Hischachos. And that happens Eresh on Yom Beis on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. The Oidzos, more so. Even though we're not, in other words, we can't say that there's a lack in the Hischachos, because then how do the worlds exist if the worlds go back up on the evening of Rosh Hashanah? Then we need on day one the worlds to be renewed, otherwise the worlds can't exist. So Shabbos has to replicate everything that Shofar can do. The ear, our physical ear, does not hear the actual shofar, and therefore it doesn't have that awakening, that feeling of hisayrus, of inspiration, of arousal that you have when you hear that sound of the shofar on Yom Aleph Rosh Hashanah. And that first, when you hear the shofar, you actually hear the sound of the shofar. There's a feeling, a feeling on the person's guf, an awakening, an inspiration that you don't have. No, there's not only a ruchnistic thing that the Avodas Adam is accomplishing something a Yom Beis that wasn't done a Yom Aleph. Even physically speaking, on Rosh Hashanah you're lacking that physical sound of the shofar, and on his Yom Beis, when you actually blow the shofar, he hears it with his physical ears. Also someone else can hear it. Even the nations of the world can hear the sound of shofar on Yom Beis. And it actually has a physical effect on him. To remember the coronation of the Eibishter, the King of the world, which this is hinted in Tkiyah Shofar. As the Psadi Goin explains al Pasuk, that the Pasuk says in Tilim that with trumpets and the sound of Shofar you blow before HaMelech Hashem. So he says that Shofar is, the idea of Shofar is the coronation of the Eibishter, Lifnei HaMelech Hashem. The Lisker HaShofar Matan Torah, that Reb Sadi Goin also says that the Shofar on Rosh Hashanah reminds us of the Shofar of Matan Torah. Hashayach L'Tkiyah Shofar to Rosh Hashanah, which the Shofar of Matan Torah is connected to Rosh Hashanah. So when you blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it reminds us of the shofar that was blown by Matan Torah. All this happens before Psukei Shofris. In other words, in Chassidus it explains that on Yom Aleph to Rosh Hashana, when it's Shabbos, even though you don't actually blow the shofar, but at least you say Psukei Shofris, which gives you some shaycha, some connection to shofar. The closest you can get to shofar on Rosh Hashana, which is Shabbos, is Psukei Shofris. On Yom Beis Din Rosh Hashana, even before you get to Psukei Shofris, you already hear the shofar, you hear it with your own ears, it awakens you, it affects your guf, to remember the Eibishter as a king, to remember Matan Torah. It has an actual impact on your physical person. That can only happen on Yom Beis Din Rosh Hashana in this type of kfiyas. So what can be done Yom Aleph Rosh Hashana could just happen on Yom Beis Din Rosh Hashana. Ubazehu ha'ilui. And that is the advantage, the greatness of this kviyas. Because in this kviyas, it emphasizes and underscores the importance of the person's aveda even more than if Rosh Hashana would fall out on any other day of the week. First of all, simply on a simple level. And other years, when Hashana falls out on any other day, not Shabbos, the Yischachas comes through, the renewal of the world is accomplished through blowing shofar to the Avedis Adam. Masha'inkin Geshachal Liyas B'Shabbos had a Nif'eles Yischachas B'Lei Avedasei. But when Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, this renewal is being accomplished without his Aveda. So by the time you get to day 2 of Rosh Hashanah, really the Yischachas Elomeis was already done. Nevertheless, we tell the person, even though on day 1 of Rosh Hashanah, the world was renewed and in a complete sense, because it was accomplished through Shabbos, which is already sanctified. There's a pre-existing holiness in Shabbos that accomplished this renewal of the worlds on day 1. Nevertheless, even after everything that was accomplished through Shabbos, on Yom Aleph, we tell the person, we need you to do the Aveda as well. And on the second day, you have to blow shofar. We need you. On other days, we don't see it so much, because since no one else can do it, Shabbos can't do it, so the person does it. That's just how it's done. But on a year, when Yom Tov is on Shabbos, when Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, when the Aveda is being done without him, and yet we tell him, we need you to do it, we need your Aveda. This tells us how important of a role that the Adam Lamata plays. And this is the lesson to every single Yid. And underscored and emphasized specifically in this Kviyas. Excuse me. When we say that we demand Aveda, person's Aveda, it's not just in a case where something is lacking, something needs to be rectified. And through his Aveda, he rectifies it and perfects it. Even when this thing was already rectified and completed by the tzaddikim. And even when it's done by the Eibishter, who is the tzaddik of the world, the Eibishter still needs the Aveda, the work of the person below. So much so that without the person's Aveda, the completion is not a true completion. There's so much so that even Gan Eden, that the Eibishter himself planted a garden in Eden. It was made by Hashem, it's godly made. What more can you need? Nevertheless, you need the person to work it and to watch over it. Basically, you need the Aveda Sa'adam, and like it says it brings in the Hara from the Hamshech Samach Vav, that through the Aveda of the Avda L'Shamra, you're mamshech a new from Eid Ein Sof and Maitzil, from the highest levels of Eid Ein Sof into the Mata, into this godly made garden. The Eibishter made it. Nevertheless, the Eibishter made it in a way that it needs Aveda Samata. So, lesson number 1, Al Pi Apshat, is Pashut, very simple, that what we see is that as much as was accomplished the first day, nevertheless there's something lacking which only the person could accomplish, And therefore, this teaches us how important it is the Avodas Hamata. Gam al pi pnimis ha'inyan. The Yosef Aleph. The B'yem Aleph Aliyah Sa'ilim is B'pnimius, B'yem Beis B'chitzenius. Also, according to Chassidus, the Pnimis Ha'inyanim, that on day that both Yem Aleph and Yem Beis, both days of Rosh Hashana is Aliyah Sa'ilim. Just on day one it's Pnimius, and on day one it's B'chitzenius. On day one it's more felt the lack of worldliness, and on day two the world begins to feel itself, but yet still recognizes dependence on Elokus. Also, in this idea, basically the impact of Elokus on the world, also we're going to see an advantage of Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, of Yom Beis de Rosh Hashanah. Because the Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Shechali is B'Shabbos, Mudgeshes Yesech Shivas Vedas Adam, will also see how on day two, when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos on day one, we see the importance of the Vedas Adam. The B'yei Malav, the Nasvan Yonam Adi Shabbos, the Mekatche V'Kaima, on day one, when it's being accomplished through Shabbos, which has a pre-existing holiness, a Nikr V'Nigla B'Elam Azagash Me'inat Kiyah Shefer. You don't see its impact on this world. Because you don't see shofar in this world. You don't see we don't make a bracha on shofar. We don't say shechianu on shofar. Because the impact of shofar on this world is not being seen. But on the second day of Yom Tov, the person blows shofar, he's drawing down by making the bracha. He says that Vitzivanu means to connect, that we're connecting the Eibishter with this world. The Ein Tzadich Beged Chadash, and you don't even need a new beged. In other words, in Shulchan Aruch it says that on a regular year, since we make Shechianu on day one on Shofar, it's questionable if you can make Shechianu again on Shofar, because you already made Shechianu on day one, and therefore you should put on a Beged Chadash, a new beged, and have in mind when you say Shechianu that it's going on the Beged Chadash. But if you didn't blow Shofar the first day, so you could say Shechianu on the shofar, and you don't need a beged chadash to say Shechianu. Ki mevarech b'pashtus Shechianu v'kimanu v'yanu l'zman hazeh. You're saying b'pashtus Shechianu v'kimanu v'yanu l'zman hazeh, that you're bringing that we've arrived. Special moment happens when? On day two. On day one we didn't have this moment because the uftu of shofar wasn't felt in this world, but on day two when we blow shofar we feel the specialty of the moment and we can make a shechianu. So also b'pnimisa inyanim, that it's all about the impact on this world. We feel it more in this year because of the contrast that on day one we didn't make the bracha on shofar because we didn't feel shofar, and on day two we do make the bracha because we do experience the uftu of shofar dafka on day two, when you can make a shechianu dafka on day two. And this is the uftu of Yom Tov Shashana Chalis B'Shabbos, that the specialty of Yom Beis, that the Avedas Hamata, the Avedas Adam, is emphasized and underscored, and it shows us how important our involvement is in what's being done on Rosh Hashanah, which is ultimately renewing the worlds for the purpose of Dira B'Tachtainim.